Shalom and welcome to the European Report. Here we are in the European Parliament, in the heart of the European Union, in Brussels. And in today's programme, we'll be doing a news review of 2018, looking at the major stories that have had an impact on Israel, the Middle East and the European Union. And in today's programme, I'm joined by the founder and director of the European Coalition for Israel, Tomas Sandell. Good to have you on the programme again, as well as Dr. Andreas Kelling, who's now a special envoy for the European Coalition for Israel, which is great news. And also Bill Etheridge, MEP for the Midlands. So welcome to the programme. Tomas, I mean, we've had an extremely eventful year in 2018, but in terms of the work of the European Coalition for Israel, what have been some of the highlights and what have been some of the major activities that you've been involved in on behalf of the nation of Israel and the Jewish people during 2018?
Thank you, Simon, and it's good to look back, as you say, on a very dynamic and dramatic year. And obviously, we rejoice about the same things as the Jewish people rejoice about, thinking then primarily about the embassy move in May. Also, I think for the United States to withdraw from the nuclear agreement with Iran. I think when you look at the achievements, you have to be modest. I mean, we're playing our part. We are not the Donald Trumps of this world. But I think when it comes to the embassy move, what we've done over the last 7-8 years to consistently explain the legal foundation of the State of Israel, why Jerusalem is important, why the historical and cultural connections between the Jewish people and the city of Jerusalem have had an impact. I recall that just half a year before President Trump made his announcement in Washington, we had a large group of UN ambassadors listening to Dr. Jacques Gautier explaining this very topic, why Jerusalem was so special to the Jewish people and why Jerusalem should be the capital of the Jewish state. So obviously I'd like to say that we played a little part in this long process to legitimize in a way this move. The only other thing that I would mention, because I don't want to take the full 27 minutes, is again how we raised the issue of hatred in Palestinian textbooks and being able to raise this with the key governments within the European Union, and also see this acknowledgement that this is not right, it has to change, we need an independent international review. Obviously, this is something that doesn't, is not achieved during one particular calendar year, something that we will continue to press on. But it's been a dramatic year, but it's also been a good year, I think, for the State of Israel.
Absolutely. And Andreas, it's good to have you back on the programme. You did very well last time, and also congratulations on your new appointment as the Special Envoy for the European Coalition for Israel, which is good news. But I suppose one of the major issues of 2018 was the Islamic Republic of Iran. Back in January, made the headlines because the regime arrested over 3,700 peaceful protesters. In May, US President Donald Trump announced that he was pulling out of the Iran deal. And since then, we've seen the Iranian build-up of troops in Syria that pose a direct threat to Israel and to the region. Why do you think the issue of Iran dominated our news headlines, and why does the EU need to take note of this, in your opinion?
Well, I think it has something to do with the inability of European politicians and the press to accept that Donald Trump is President of the United States of America. He has been a very outspoken opinion about terror regimes, and he's not afraid of articulating his opinion in a very fresh and uncommon and direct way. So I think sooner or later also European politicians will have to accept that he's right in addressing a lie as a lie and a terrorist regime as a terrorist regime, which Iran happens to be. The second question that you asked, well, why is it important? Why is it important that Europeans should be careful about Iran? European politicians tend to have a secular background. So for them, by nature, it is very difficult to understand that the power of religion. So without understanding this religious in-depth insight, one will not understand that Iran is serious about wiping out Israel from the landscape of the Middle East, and that they will do that. That's my point number one. Number two, we have 1.5 billion Sunni. We have about 200 million Shia. The most important representative of the Shia is Iran, with about half of the population. There's a massive division between the two. So the question for the European Union, who do you want to be associated with? If we then look at the region, there is no Muslim democracy in the Middle East. We have either authoritarian regimes or we have terrorist regimes. If we look at authoritarian regimes, we could look at Saudi Arabia, we could look at Jordan, at Egypt, at Turkey. But if we look at terrorist regimes, then we have Iran and their relations into Syria, the Hezbollah and the Hamas. The question again, who does the European Union wishes to be associated with? And if we then take it one step further, that the only democracy in the Middle East is Israel.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bill, it's great to have you on the programme. You're probably the most honest member of this European Parliament, member of this House, so it's great to have you on the programme. Now, you've just recently made headlines because you switched parties from being a member of UKIP, the UK Independence Party, to the Libertarian Party. Do you want to share a little bit about what that means and why you did that?
Yeah, well, I was passionately involved in UKIP for many years. I joined in 2011 and I worked night and day for that party and what I believed it stood for. Unfortunately, since the great victory in the referendum, the party has lost its way and it's been taken on now by new leadership who, rather than it being a freedom-loving, liberty-loving party that was absolutely not in any way full of prejudice or hate, although it was tried to be characterised as such, it actually is now going down the route of fulfilling all of the criticism it once had that was unjust. And they've gone so far down this route. They're also having imposed upon them policies of state control, nationalisation, and picking out one minority in the country, which happens to be the Muslims in the country, for constant abuse and criticism. It sounds eerily reminiscent of the evil regimes of the past, and quite frankly, having tried to stop them going down this route and failed, I simply couldn't be associated with them. I've gone to a party which believes in freedom, small state, less taxes, less rules and regulations, but is absolutely colourblind, religion blind. It just takes people as humans and individuals, and that's what I believe in.
Excellent. And Bill, very much like your views on the Islamic Republic of Iran, they are today the world's leading state sponsor of international terrorism. They have a shocking human rights abuse record. They are spreading fear and terror throughout the Middle East. And they are wanting to acquire the most dangerous weapon of all, nuclear weapons, in which their regime has constantly threatened to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. We've also seen that back in October they carried out and attempted political assassinations against opponents in Denmark. When is this Parliament, do you think, going to wake up to the threat posed by Iran to European security?
I'm afraid I don't think it will. I think that this is a massive problem. They'll have endless debates and motions bleating about human rights, and they will include Iran in that. You know, they condemn the death penalty and things like that. Well, okay. But when it comes to Iran saying it wants to obliterate a whole nation, when it comes to Iran spreading terror and being an evil force in the area, no way will they unite about that. Now, there are many reasons behind that, but I do believe that much of it is to do intrinsically with many of these politicians here having an inbuilt hate of Israel. And they feel that if they are against Iran, then somehow they're in favour of Israel. And the anti-Israel noises that come out of this place, as we've discussed before, are alarming and disturbing. And I don't think they're going to confront the Iran issue. In fact, they've tried their best to water down some of President Trump's measures against Iran and to try and be a more friendly voice towards them. How can you be friendly towards an evil regime? You have to oppose it block it and stand with our true friends, which I believe are Israel.
Absolutely, well said, Bill. And Thomas, sadly in 2018 we've seen that Jew hatred is on the rise in this continent and also in the States. And in February we saw that the Polish government introduced a highly controversial Holocaust bill that stated it was illegal to suggest that Poland or Polish people were complicit in the Holocaust. We've seen the leadership of the British Labour Party plagued with accusations of anti-Semitism, and the most disturbing of all, that recently CNN conducted a survey of 7,000 European adults across 7 European countries, and the results were shocking. If I just mention what these were, it says that more than a quarter of those surveyed believe that Jews had too much influence in business and finance. 1 in 5 believe that Jewish people have too much influence over media and politics. And then, of course, we saw the shocking attack by a white supremacist in the synagogue in Pittsburgh. Thomas, it would appear from this survey that news reports of anti-Semitism have gone into mainstream European society. What does this mean for the future of Europe?
Well, let me first say that tomorrow will be a special day here in the European Parliament. We will celebrate the 15th anniversary of European Coalition for Israel. For the simple reason that we saw this coming already 15 years ago, the rise of anti-Semitism. And those who know the history of ECI, they know that Elie Wiesel at the time, he was asking, well, why is it that it's still only the Jewish people who see this threat and are discussing it? So we feel very privileged to be non-Jews, to be Christians, to be here in support of the Jewish people. And it's true that anti-Semitism today has so many facets, and it has gone into mainstream. You can get away with things which would be unthinkable in the past. I'm thinking about your own country, Britain, with the possibility of having a prime minister that would be openly anti-Semitic. It's one thing to see what is happening, say, in Central and Eastern European countries. There is prejudice in these countries, but what we see at the same time is very interesting. A Jew walking around in Budapest, in Warsaw today is much safer than anywhere in France, in Britain, in Belgium, in the Netherlands. So I think in Western Europe, we have to be a little bit more modest in how we look at what we perceive to be the biggest threat against the Jewish people. If Paris is a place where you can no longer walk around, or Brussels with the kippah, we have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, well, anti-Semitism is a problem here in our own societies, and we need to fight it. We need to stand up and do it again today.
And Andreas, we know that anti-Semitism or Jew hatred is the oldest hatred of all, with devastating consequences, not only for the Jewish people, but also for mainstream society. And we know also from Germany's history the consequences of allowing that spirit of anti-Semitism to rise. In your opinion, what must Europe do, or the European Union do, to protect its precious Jewish community and also protect the freedom of Europe if it doesn't tackle this issue of Jew hatred?
Yeah, let me answer the question like this. I think it's a scandal that we need to think as Europeans about protecting Jewish communities in Europe. Do we need to protect Muslims, Protestants, or Catholics? Do we need to protect the Turks or the Americans or the Russians that come to Europe? I would rather like to turn the whole question around and not talk about protecting Jews or Israelis, but acknowledging that the Jewish people have been a part and an integral part of European history for ages. I mean, we're talking about thousands of years. If I look at the German history, Henry II, who came into rulership in 995, he invited at that time the first Jewish people to Germany from southern Italy. Why? Because he wanted civilization to be brought into Germany, and invited these people. So the question is, can we rethink and welcome Jewish people and how they have contributed to the well-being of our societies? I mean, open your computer. What kind of processor are you going to have in there? Most likely an Intel one. Well, that has been manufactured in Haifa in Israel. If you look at inventions in agriculture for arid regions in the world, I mean, it's the Jewish people that have contributed to saving millions of people that would have been dead by today. And maybe a final thought, I mean, we're here in the European Parliament. If the European Union sent last week the message into the world through the United Nations that Israel is basically creating trouble for foreign tourists to come and see the holy sites. This is a scandal. This is something that you cannot explain somewhat between Lisbon and Tallinn, because I mean, I go to the next travel agent, I buy a ticket, and I go to Jerusalem as a Jew, as a Christian, as a Muslim. What is the issue there? And then our leaders pretend as if there is an issue.
Yeah.
Were we able to visit the holy places before 1967? No. Were the Jewish people be able to visit the holy places before 1967? No. It's a message that we cannot explain. We create anti-Semitism in order to combat it afterwards with millions of euros. That's a scandal from my perspective.
Absolutely, very good comment. And Bill, what do you think measures could be put in place by this House, by the European Commission, to tackle the growing problem of anti-Semitism? Because it has gone mainstream into European society with probably devastating consequences for this whole continent.
There's a very straightforward thing that can be done immediately, and it doesn't need to be from the Commission. It has to be from the politicians. They've got to stop being so cynical. They've got to stop.
Told you, honest.
Well, this is the truth of the matter. Many of the socialist and left parties across Europe, and certainly we've heard the dishonourable mention of the British Labour Party, and I'll focus in on that because it's what I know more about. They are focusing in, especially in inner cities, on trying to get as many votes from the Muslim community as they can. It's simple. Without those block votes that they get by the kind of things they put forward, they would lose hundreds of seats, or run very close to it. The reason why, from the top, they're doing this anti-Israel, this hatred, this anti-Semitism, which is becoming more and more obvious, and they're struggling to deny it because it's so clear, is because it's helping them to say, look, we're pro-Palestine and Palestinian freedom causes, etc., etc., and they're getting block votes from it. It's cynical and it's wrong. And also, what they're trying to do is now conflate as well, these hard left people are trying to conflate Jewish people with the rich, and therefore build resentment against them. Again, as I said earlier about the leadership direction the UKIP was taking against the Muslims. This is eerily reminiscent of things we've heard in the past of people who proclaim to be socialists. You know, Jews are rich, Jews are business people, Jews are in the media, and we don't like Jews, and we pick them out. This is cynical exploitation, and it's leading a very slippery slope that we're going down. And the fact that we're talking about anti-Semitism, it's nearly 2019, in the civilized Western world, beggars belief. Beggars belief. And it can be stopped by these people here feeding back to their parties, stop this.
Well, good advice. And Tomas, 2018 was a great year for Israel. It was a great year for Israel supporters, particularly when President Trump decided to move the embassy, the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to mark Israel's 70th anniversary as a nation reborn. How significant was that move by President Trump? And also, can we expect other EU member states to actually move their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
Yeah. Let me first commend my friend here from the UK. I very much like what you said, and I think it's so important to hear it in this program. When we see signs of anti-Semitism, we always speak out, and we are not shy about mentioning the sources. But I think it's equally important always, if we see anti-Muslim sentiments, that we can be just as consistent and strong as you are. So I want to commend you for that statement before I answer your question. On the embassy move, what concerns me the most right now, and I've been going public saying this, is the fact that we have one particular EU member state blocking others from moving their embassies to Jerusalem. That EU member state is Germany. And this is something which is really shocking that we've seen exposed in media in the last few weeks. I heard about it earlier, how Angela Merkel had picked up the phone and spoken to the president of Romania and other Central and Eastern European leaders this spring and say, listen, whatever you do, you cannot move your embassy. Well, sometimes justice comes very quickly, and we know that Merkel is now on her way out. She will be replaced as party chair of the CDU. So this is only to say that there would have been an interest in many EU member countries to follow the US example and follow something which is very natural, say in Czech, in Poland, in Bulgaria and Romania. And we need to encourage and empower these member states to do what they know is right. And we should not let anyone bully you, be it Britain or France or Germany, but in this case it was Germany, and I think this is something we need to point out.
Absolutely. So we're down less than 5 minutes to the programme, so need to sum up really. So Andreas, what is your view? Because the European Union is pretty much leading the worldwide opposition to the recognition that Jerusalem is Israel's eternal capital. We've heard from Tomas here that Angela Merkel is particularly involved in persuading other EU member states not to move their embassy to Jerusalem and not to recognise Jerusalem as Israel's eternal city. Now that has, in a sense, untold spiritual consequences, particularly if we look at Genesis 12, where God says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think as politicians or diplomats, we all believe that we are able to influence history. But I think we must be modest and accept that God created this world and that He's also going to bring this world to an end. So in other words, we as politicians and diplomats are not going to change God's plans, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. But we may be part of an exciting journey in joining God's hands in shaping the world into the right direction. That's point number one. Number two, I find it most interesting to see how many African leaders understand this message that you just mentioned. And these leaders are coming from countries where the ruling party still may have politburos, where freedom fighters honestly believed to create a new world by means of socialism and failed. But they now come and understand that they must change their attitude, and they do this one by one, changing their attitudes towards Jerusalem, and they do this one by one and seek mutual beneficial relations. I find this incredible and a very good answer.
Excellent. And Bill, the EU's foreign policy position on Jerusalem is one that they want to see the city divided between East and West Jerusalem. They want East Jerusalem to be a capital of a future Palestinian state. So can you explain to us why so many EU commissioners and MPs think this is possible when the majority of those Arabs living in East Jerusalem actually want to be under Israeli sovereignty, and also the fact that only Israel has granted holy access for the three major religions, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, and that would be put under serious threat in a divided Jerusalem?
As with everything that comes out of here, it's impractical, it's pie in the sky, it's nonsense. The reality is that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. That is the reality that we should all accept and, for my part, celebrate having been there. They see a problem with this constant issue of Palestinian states and all the rest of it, and they think, well, the best thing to do is just draw some lines on a map and try and make everyone happy. It's fudge and it's stupidity. This place never, ever does the hard thing but the right thing. It always does the thing that tries to appease and soften a line. The only argument I ever hear against moving embassies to Jerusalem and all the rest of it is, oh, it'll cause trouble, it'll cause terrorism. That's all the more reason to defy these people and do the right thing.
Absolutely.
But that takes political strength, and there's a great shortage of that here.
Well said, well said. It's down to a minute. So summing up on 2018, what are the challenges facing ECI in 2019, and what role can our viewers play in standing with Israel here in this European Parliament and across the EU?
Yep. Well, in the next few months, we will prepare for new European elections. Well, in the meantime, one particular member country may leave, but
got a big member country.
For the others, we're preparing for new elections. And I think a lot is shifting in Europe now. I see a potential for something very good coming out of the election results, but there's also great danger. And I think for us as ECI, really to be able to navigate in this very new environment with strong nationalistic movements, with populist movements, extremism in form or another. This will really take a lot of wisdom from us. But I think for what everyone can do, and this is the motto for the work we do, pray, educate, and advocate. We all have a voice, we all can pray, we can all read and make sure we get the facts right by listening to this program, but then we can also advocate, pick up the phone and speak to our members of parliament, write a letter, and this is what makes democracy so great, that every voice matters.
Tomas, thank you so much. Andreas, thank you so much for being my guest, and Bill as well, the most honest man in this house. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank you for watching today's European report here in the European Parliament. On behalf of the European Coalition for Israel and Revelation TV, we want to wish our wonderful viewers a very happy Christmas and a wonderful New Year for 2019. And as the new year approaches, let's continue to stand for Israel and stand for the Jewish people, because we are living in biblical times. So thank you for watching today's European report.